Maryanne, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you.
Hi, Jason.
We are talking about your paper that is being released this week, Teacher Training and Supply. We're looking at doing 3 of these papers over the next month or so. This is the first one. We're looking at education. Why particularly this topic, teacher training and supply?
Mainly because teachers are the core of education.
Yeah.
Other things, you want the quality in everything to be fantastic.
Yeah.
But the single biggest factor in whether or not a kid gets a good education is the teacher they have.
Yeah.
So the teachers you have throughout your education really shape you like nothing else.
Yeah. I definitely remember several of my teachers who were not very good and several who were standout. Yeah. And
Yes.
so I know what you mean. Like you remember those teachers and they have a big impact, not just on your learning, but like you say, on who you are going forward. So you delved into this issue, teacher supply, training. We've had a few strikes and pay disputes and things like that. What did you find? What were some of the issues that you found as you delved in?
Some of them were obvious. We know we've got a shortage of teachers.
Yeah.
We know that there's a crisis in attracting them.
Yeah.
The pay deal, a bit too late, but it helped bring salaries back in line with professional salaries. But we've got people leaving teaching to go to other professions at a higher rate than ever before.
So it didn't actually slow down the whole...
Well, we'll see what it does going forward because that's only just kicked in.
Yeah.
But at the moment, so in secondary schools, the average number of New Zealand trained applicants for a position is 1.55.
Wow.
And the previous low, just quite recently, was 3, which meant the average position you'd have 3 people to choose from.
Yeah.
This means that as often as not, you've got no candidate as often as you've got 2.
Yeah. Wow.
2.5, which is not a lot to choose from.
No.
So a lot of principals are relying on, especially in secondary schools, on international teachers.
Yeah.
So getting people into the country, problems with that. They have to get a visa.
It's a whole thing in itself, isn't it?
Yeah. It's more expensive to recruit. It's more challenging. And more now, the applicants are coming from countries who don't have education systems that are similar to our own.
Okay.
So if they're coming from Australia, if they're coming from the UK, sweet.
It's okay,
there are a few challenges, but more and more from countries where they could be excellent teachers, but English might not be their first language. There'll be some additional hurdles.
Yeah.
So recruitment is a problem. More are leaving for other careers. That
So
was
just
up
changing
to
totally. Just like, no, I'm not teaching anymore. I'm going to go do office admin or event management or whatever.
And especially in secondary schools where you've got people who might be able to become engineers if they move sideways or something else given the skills they've got.
Yeah.
So you've got those hard to, STEM classes and others are very hard to staff at the moment. One of the reasons is the people who've been trained in those areas can have better pay, better working conditions, going to,
Doing
corporate or something else.
Wow.
So the numbers were showing, I discovered that is actually quite significant. So the turnover in 2021 was 12%, and then that jumped to 19% in 2021.
Yeah.
I mean, if you sustain that level, that means your average teacher is only staying in the job just over 5 years.
Wow.
So hopefully that number is going to drop back down again, but it spiked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's quite a few issues you've outlined for us.
Yeah.
What does that mean for students in our schools?
Well,
Other than they're seeing teachers, like some of the teachers won't even last while they're in the school. Yeah.
Yeah, because ultimately it is about the students. But for the students to get a good education, you need to have enough teachers and teachers trained in those areas. Now, this is one of the interesting things. We did a poll and put it out there. What do you think would make teaching a more attractive profession?
Yeah.
What do people think would help us get more and better teachers in the door? Most people chose one of the 2 salary options. That was 41%. A quarter pointed to student-teacher ratios, and only 6% went with further professional development.
Yeah.
So it's not on our radar how teachers are being equipped to be teachers.
Yeah.
I don't know what most people know about teacher education. I didn't know a whole lot before I looked into it.
Yeah.
And you just kind of assume you just get trained to be a teacher.
You get taught how to teach reading, writing. Yeah.
Training teachers for years.
Yeah.
Same. So I came into this asking, are there is there any type of teacher training that is better than another? Are we seeing success in one area and not in another? And in talking to people, so this has included like a vice principal at one of the highest ranked secondary schools around here, people who are researchers in education, people who train teachers. And I consistently got told that, yes, there is a better way to train teachers. And the way we've been training teachers for the past 20, 30 years is not the best way.
Okay.
So, yes, we have a problem, and most teachers are going through training options that are not grounding them in what they need to be grounded in. So that's a significant problem. Especially because this comes after 20, 30 years of heading in one direction that it turns out was a bit of a failed experiment. So practically what that means is teacher educators are really committed at the moment to a highly student-centered approach. That's been affecting the curriculum. It's been affecting how teachers are trained.
I think every parent has gone to a student-led conference at least once in the last little while.
I'm not going to knock student-led conferences. I haven't been to one. But if you think about student-led learning, it's like where are students going to lead their learning if they don't have a grounding already? So there are flaws with the approach. There's also, alongside that idea that students can lead their learning, is the idea that all knowledge is kind of equal. There isn't powerful knowledge that needs to be imparted for students to progress. It's the idea that it's more about the process. And I mean, it sounds good, putting students at the center, following what they are most motivated to engage in, but it has to be balanced with this idea that there are ways to teach knowledge that is important. The knowledge is important, and the ways to teach it are important.
For knowledge retention as well.
Yes.
So, and equipping going forward.
And if you think that any particular knowledge isn't that much more important than any other, you're not going to be highly committed to making sure that certain knowledge is embedded in students. And the facts show that actually is wrong. If you look at our NCEA scores, so what is it, 15% left without any qualifications recently, and 25 without NCEA too. Like, this has been a consistent trend, and it tracks with the philosophy behind.
So we see the variable of training in a different philosophy. 15, 20 years later, we see outcomes of high rates of unattainment, student unattainment. And so we can draw a line, go, look, this teacher training is not producing students that are equipped to navigate the world that we live in.
And education's complex. There are many factors influencing student outcomes. But when you think about it, there have been a lot of technological advances. I mean, students have access to knowledge that when we were in school, you couldn't pull something out of your pocket and search for a bit of information and find it. So we've had those advances. In the 90s, the teachers' colleges began to be absorbed into the universities. So now we have our most elite educational establishments turning out the majority of our teachers. So you would think that if those were actually advances, we wouldn't have a decline in outcomes. So something isn't working the way it should be.
So what does all of this mean for the teachers themselves?
So for teachers, there are a number of challenges here. If you've gone into a career not as well equipped as you could be, that's frustrating. If you
turn up on the first day and find you're not really equipped to do the job you're being asked to do, you can't quite do it as well as you'd hope. It's frustrating.
So it seems that a lot of the attrition rates are down to teachers getting burned out. Now, one of the reasons their workloads have also increased, because alongside this student-led learning, they've stripped the curriculum back to the bare bones, which is what you have to do if you don't want to prescribe learning and you want it to be quite contextualized. That's, kind of the logical result is, well, you can't define what you're going to teach them. You've got to leave it open to go whatever direction the context and the student wants to take it. For teachers, that means they are deciding out of the masses of information that could be taught in any subject area, what they're going to teach.
Yeah.
And then they have to write their lessons.
Oh, yeah.
So that wasn't the case until the past 20 or 30 years. In Australia, where they have gone down a very similar track and are showing signs of doing a good old U-turn.
Yeah.
Somebody there who's heading up the Knowledge Society, they estimate that teachers are writing about 700 of their own lessons a year.
Wow.
There. And it wouldn't be that different here. That's a huge workload on top of what is already a challenging job.
Yeah.
So if that meant you were delivering better education, all that, those 700, or even if it's half that extra, lessons a year that they're having to write, maybe it would be worth it. But when you go, the results are actually worse and teachers are doing more, really something needs to change.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense at all. It's a failed ideology at this point.
Yeah. So all of this kind of bad news, going down the wrong track, increasing dropout rates and failure rates, is there a way that we can reverse it? Do you think it's possible? And if so, what do you think could be done?
We have to.
Yeah, we have to.
You can look around and see that, Australia is. So its ministers of education are now mandating that teacher training institutions incorporate evidence-based methods of teaching.
Yeah.
Some of them sound very much like the way things used to be done, but we also have more recent, psychology of learning that is informing it.
Yeah.
So it's the best of what was being done and the best of the knowledge that we have now.
Yeah. Which is what you would hope would be in teacher
exactly,
training, right?
You want to retain what works. And
Yeah.
it looks like we have just turned over stuff that was working and traded it in for something newer and shinier that doesn't actually have any evidence that it works.
Yeah.
So yes, we can. The UK, it's made changes over the past decade. The scores for students have turned around. There are people out of South Africa, I've read, as well as Australia, who are basically saying, we got it wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some of these people are ones who themselves once believed in this ideology. So anybody who's following the evidence is going, we need to change course here. So it is undoable, but unfortunately it's turned into a bit of a death spiral.
Yeah.
Because if you have ill-equipped teachers who aren't staying in the job long, they're not being effective. The students aren't learning. When they graduate and try to become teachers, which some of them will, they don't have the grounding that they needed to have. Teachers in the job aren't being supported by well-equipped teachers around them because they're understaffed and under-equipped. And the whole mess is making it less attractive for people to become teachers. So you've got a perfect storm of one thing's led to another. I think that the one thing that's most likely to reverse the trend is to better equip teachers. Because again, it comes back to if you've got good teachers, things get better.
Yeah, and if you experience a good teacher, you're more likely to think, maybe I could do this.
There are so many ways where good teachers lead to better and better outcomes across the board, including getting other good teachers.
Yeah. That's great. So it's coming up to the election time. We get to have a say on this. There hasn't been a whole bunch of great education, visionary, evidence-based policies, but this really should be a conversation, which is why we're doing this. These papers that we're releasing. What else can we do to help? What can we do at the election? What can we do coming up to it?
I wish there was a party that had come up with a fabulous policy that directly spoke about teacher education. Yeah. And none of them have.
Just say,
so I can't
go
that this party's nailed it. You have both National and Labour who have identified kind of the obvious. This is not, any news. Literacy and numeracy need support.
Yeah.
I think that the reason it needs support is because teachers aren't being well equipped. Yeah. And, we've spoken previously about the experience in Canberra of retraining those teachers, and the students who were underachieving in reading went from 42% to 4% in 3 years.
In 3 years, that's massive,
I mean, if that doesn't tell you that upskilling teachers or training them
that was just from retraining teachers, right?
Yes, 1,500 teachers over 3 years, and that was a massive difference in literacy, which is,
core
fundamental thing. National and Labour are talking about how it should be taught in schools or how much it should be taught in schools. And it really begs the question, why was it not already being taught well or being taught that much? So rather than mandating it from the government, it would be better if the Teachers Council required that of teacher training institutions.
Yeah.
And that teachers showed proficiency in it before they became teachers.
Yeah.
That really would help. Nobody's suggesting that. ACT is trying to open up education to the market more than it is now, so that things wouldn't have to be mandated by government, so that the best ideas would I think, float to the top. That's their approach. New Zealand First, their policies, which are from 2020, they focus very much on students on the margin, which would filter through, and they do want to support teachers more in their role, especially with challenging students. Again, none of these really go to the heart of the matter. The Maori Party and Greens, they've got very ideologically based policies, which I think would take what we're currently dealing with and push it even further down that path. Of looking at education through lenses of, identity and stuff like that, rather than coming back to, well, what educationally is showing the best outcomes. So none of them are really nailing it, I think, when it comes to properly turning this around. Some of them are talking about issues that clearly are issues. So what can we do? I don't know that there's a whole lot we can do when we go to vote, but I think that, at the moment, the curriculum is wide open. So your school board, whatever influence you have in your own school, can influence what is taught there. So I think this is very much a community
grassroots kind of a thing
at the moment. Since there's no kind of top-down move to change anything, what we can do is just encourage these kind of discussions in our own communities and hope that the right people, take up on it.
Awesome. Oh, well, thanks, Maryanne. Great to have you with us.
Thanks, Jason.